Welcome to Gritty is the New Pretty, where resilience meets real talk. I'm your host, Crystal, entrepreneur, leadership coach, change maker, and outdoor enthusiast. Join me as I sit down with powerhouse women leaders, entrepreneurs, and small business owners who share their raw, unfiltered stories of success, struggle, and the grit it takes to make an impact. From navigating change to redefining success, we'll explore what it takes to rise, lead, and thrive. Expect raw conversations to fuel your journey, whether you're breaking down barriers in life or in business. We're redefining success, not by perfection, but by the strength it takes to rise again and again, because in this space, gritty is the new pretty. Hit subscribe and let's get gritty with it. This episode is sponsored by Hey Beck's Creative House, founded by brand strategist Becky LaFranchi, known for building crave-worthy brands that blend story, soul, and strategy. Explore the work at heybecks.com. On this episode of Gritty is the New Pretty, we have Jamie, who went from interior design major to CEO of Confetë balloons.
I did not help you with that, did I?
I feel like it just ends abruptly there, but a small business, Confetti, that's been super successful, and I'm really excited to get into what it's all about. So, Jamie, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, and I think that's totally my fault as I confuse you before we get started.
It's easily done, easily done.
Yeah, so you said tell me more about myself. I'm sorry,
Yeah, tell me about you. What do you want us to know? Tell us your story.
Yeah, I mean, I started my business, 8 years ago, and it was funny. I just actually did an event where I had to kind of speak, and it was I was trying to. It was for a Women's International Day, and I was trying to give. It was kind of like, what am I wanting to say to other women that are in the audience? It was funny. It was like my dream really started out incredibly simple. It was like I really just wanted the freedom and flexibility to work for myself and to be able to take my son to school and to his activities without feeling like I had to make the you know, the hard decisions that a lot of people have to make between the two. And that's really what caused me to want to start my own business.
And so tell us about your business. Tell us about Confetti.
Yeah, so we launched in 2017. And actually, when we first originally started, we were shipping celebratory gift boxes across the US. And the whole concept and idea was that for people who aren't very good at putting that stuff together, like we would be able to do that and have these Instagrammable parties. And so when we first launched that, at the same time, I had done basically kind of a pilot of that program for my niece's graduation. I had done a balloon garland. And I was one of the crazy people who was like, I'm going to quit my job and start this business and just go full into it. I was very confident in the fact that I was going to make money immediately. And so I quit my job to do that. And so when I had done my niece's graduation, I had put up a balloon garland. And this was 8 years ago before organic balloon garlands were really a thing. Anybody really knew much about them. And I had happened to post it and somebody messaged me and was like, hey, how much would you charge to come and put that up for me? And do you do that? And at the time, I had quit my job. So I was like, absolutely. I was, you find any way to make money. And that is what started the journey on the balloon side of our business. And honestly, was not at all a part of the plan and all a part of the process, but it literally just was wildfire and it took off. And I always say this, and it's even on our website, but I'm like, it blew up, pun intended. It literally blew up, and it was kind of crazy. And I just kind of rolled with it, and we kept kind of going. And I was still at the same time pushing our gift boxes and trying to get that out. And or at the time there were more party boxes. And then if you fast forward to 2020, At that time, as that year came up, we were so busy with all these installations, and I was like, "Gosh, should we even do this like box business anymore?" Like,
Mhm.
I'm still buying product, and we're doing these photo shoots, and marketing this business is very different. Like, where the balloons were very much like visual and word of mouth. Um,
Mhm.
and so we were talking about in June, and I say we at the time I had 3 employees. And I was like, come June, if we don't see an uptick in these party boxes, like maybe we just get rid of it and we don't do it anymore. And we just focus on doing balloon installations and events. And then, of course, March of 2020 happened and everything came to a screeching halt. And we're having a meeting, and it was like, what can we do? What
Mhm.
do we do? And, we had a lot of like different, like funny ideas. We were shipping out these no boredom balloon bags. It's just funny when I think about it. So we were literally sending people just like helium, like, or not helium, but just balloons to inflate so that their kids could like toss them around and have fun with them. And, um, one of the things that we ended up doing was on our party box page, we kind of went back to that and we're like, what can we do with this? And the entire time we had the box business, there was a custom box option. And somebody had filled out a form on our website that was like, hey, my coworker is having a baby and we can't do her baby shower anymore. Like, are you able to put together a virtual party box? And so that we can all like hop on and celebrate together. So it was like, of course we can. We had all these party supplies, like we were set up for this. And so we went through and kind of created a program of like what these party boxes would look like, and eventually then put that virtual party box on our website. And that was the first time I really realized like the power of SEO and just like right timing and like when people are searching for things. And that like just took off, and we were getting constant requests for virtual party boxes from fundraisers and people that really couldn't like get together anymore. Like, you still had a lot of nonprofits that needed to raise money, but no longer could get together in person, and so they were figuring out different ways to like hold their events and still fundraise for their causes. And then but they just didn't want people to hop on a Zoom call and it'd be boring. It was like, how do we bring
Mhm.
the party to them? And that's kind of where the void that we started to fill. And then we were lucky enough to get featured in the New York Times because we had done a graduation party box, and they were writing a story about how people were celebrating during COVID and doing graduation. And so that was amazing. And I feel incredibly grateful that that happened during it, for us. Like, it was obviously during that time was very hard for a lot of people, and
Mhm.
everyone's just trying to figure out like what to do. And I do realize now that like we were incredibly blessed to have some of these things that maybe felt lucky. I think it just was right timing. And anyway, so that took off for a long time. And then fast forward a little bit past COVID, and now you have this mix of like, okay, installs started to come back from balloons, or the party boxes were slowing because people were getting back to doing in person. And we kind of shifted our party box business to a little bit more gift focused with a party flair. And I feel like, even, I mean, majority of the time when people are sending out gift boxes, like there's something to be celebrated. And so
Mhm.
it was like, how do we make these more gift focused, but still kind of have a nod to like our party um, heritage, I guess, or how we originally started. And so that's our business today. We kind of still have two businesses. We do large scale luxury balloon installations. And then we also are shipping out gift boxes across the US, mainly kind of focusing on corporate gifting.
I think that you gotta give yourself some more credit because it's not just luck. I mean, you had, number 1, a business that was fulfilling a need even before COVID hit. Then when COVID hit, you took some time to think about how to pivot, and you
Mhm.
filled another need that was so huge in the community and just in society, to connect where we weren't able to connect. and you took advantage of that. And that's where a lot of businesses become successful, is you solve a problem that a lot of people have, and you
Yep.
did. So I just want to say, I think it's more than luck, and I think it's really clever. I love what you're doing, and I am excited for the success that you've had on it. I mean, you were even on like New Day Northwest on TV. What was that like?
Yeah. So I know we've been on New Day Northwest twice now. And it's actually really interesting because it's super nerve-wracking. And then you kind of get on, it's not in front of a live audience. So actually I tell people that 'cause I'm like, it actually makes things a little bit less nervous than if you're doing
Mhm.
something in front of a live audience. But honestly, it's a really fun experience to be able to do, to kind of see like how fast moving some of those like television shows are,
Mhm.
and how it all is kind of laid out. But definitely like incredibly grateful. The first time we were on there, they had kind of contacted me out of the blue. And so that was definitely a very like unique experience. We were just on it again, and I decided to pitch them to come back on the show because we had launched our DIY balloon garland kits, and it was like, okay, well, we haven't been on here in 7 years. Like, we kind of have some like new information to share. I thought it would be something like really fun for viewers that are watching it, as something that they would be able to do. Um, but yeah, it's a really fun experience.
I think that's awesome that you pitched it back to them later, and I think that's a good lesson for others to learn, is when you have these connections and these opportunities to be on a magazine, be on a TV show, it doesn't necessarily have to be one and done. Like, you can
Mhm.
reach out to those groups again and say, "Hey, I've got something super exciting. If your audience loved it before, do you
Yep.
wanna update?" I know I plan to do that with some of the Liz Rock stuff, when we get the wall launched, is reaching out to all of the groups that put articles out, and Como even
Yep.
covered us, and I plan on reaching out and just saying, "Hey, after 10 years, here's what we've done, and we're finally doing it. Do you wanna, do a story on it?" So
Yep.
definitely wanna share that message, is don't, like, dismiss that as a one and only opportunity. Like, you can reach out again, the worst they can say is no.
Well, and honestly, too, I think persistence comes into play because so much of it has to do with, whether depending, it doesn't matter like what media you're reaching out to, but it's right timing for like what they're looking for, and it fits. And that's why like the New York Times, right, like it fit with what we had going on and what they were writing about. And so, and when I say persistence, is because I had actually pitched them probably about a year ago trying to do the same thing, maybe it was a year or two ago, and I heard nothing. And so I think it's like, and not taking that and being like, "Oh, they must not want me." It might just not have
Right.
been right timing. It might
Mhm.
not have been the right, like, audience at that time. And so, I think it's like when you have something to share, you have something new, it's just like, you're kinda just, like, reminding people like, "Hey, this might be something that's of interest to
Mhm.
your audience." And I am always, like, a big supporter of, like, mutually beneficial relationships.
Mhm.
And that's really what it comes down to, is like, is this something that is mutually beneficial, something that will work for your audience? And do I have something to like provide to them that would be, great? And obviously, like getting in front of anybody, um,
Mhm.
is good PR. But I've definitely been trying to like dabble more in like, how do you get more? Ever since New York Times, it was like I saw the power of what something like that can do. And then it was like, okay, how do I manufacture more of this?
Yeah. So when after the New York Times, like, what happened? Like, tell us about how that impact made you feel and how it affected your business.
Yeah, I mean, what I learned was it was really crazy because, like, literally when you and I started really learning a lot about, like, I don't wanna go too far into, like, techie, but I learned so much about, like, backlinking and how important the weight
Mm.
of certain backlinks, and how, like, just getting featured on the New York Times because of the weight of who they are jumps you up on Google. So when
Oh.
people were searching for virtual party boxes, like, we were number 1. because they had written about us, and I knew that it was directly impacted by the New York Times because every request that we were getting was coming from the East Coast. Um, and so it was just a really interesting thing to kind of see that impact and how it like was directly affecting like people finding our business.
Yeah, I never thought of that, that would put you at the Google. I mean, I assume you would get followers, you would get, references, people would, come to you, but I didn't think that, oh, because they're so big and so well known that now you're at the top of the Google search. That's incredible. It's good
Yeah.
information to have.
Yeah, I learned so much about, like, Google and backlinking and kind of looking at that because I think that's a lot of like, a big question that a lot of people try to, right? Like, how do you get number 1 on the search engine? And there's lots of different ways
Mhm.
that you can pay. But getting like free PR is probably the biggest one, and I learned a lot of different ways of potentially how to get that, but then like and then it's like how do you get some of those bigger ones? And it's so funny because I think we're all get scared when you think of like New York Times or Forbes or whatever. Well, all
Mhm.
the people within those are just regular people and they're all looking for new content. I mean, when you think about the
Mhm.
amount of content that's put out on a regular basis, like they're needing fresh new content. It just needs to match like with what you're doing with what they're trying to write about.
Right, like the timing and whatnot, for
Yeah.
sure.
And just some research to find out like who's writing these and how do I get in
Yeah,
front of them? And I mean, it's not necessarily easy, but or what does Mel Robbins say? It's not hard, but it's simple.
right.
No. What'd you say? It is
I
hard,
mean,
but
I
it's
don't know, but
she does.
that
I love
makes
it. It's
sense.
one of my favorite sayings because it's so good because it's literally like it's not it's hard, but it's simple, something like that.
Let me
Anyways, and
see
it
if
all right.
I'm gonna look it up.
It's
I'm
funny
gonna
'cause I'm like,
Google
I
it
love
right
it
now.
so
I
much,
gotta
but I
know.
always
Um, let's see if I can find it. Changing your life is simple, but it's not easy. Is that
yes.
yeah.
And she says that a lot with a lot of things, right? Like, it's simple, but it's not easy. That's exactly what it is.
Mhm.
So a lot of
Mhm.
things, right, are simple, but it's not necessarily easy, to do it because it talks like it's just a lot of, like, repetition um, and persistence.
Yeah, and not taking no response or no personally, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, great. Maybe next time I'll reach out in the future, or let me know if you change your mind or if something comes up. You just never know. And I
Yep.
think sometimes, we can get wrapped up in that rejection a little bit, but you know, it is what it
Yep.
is.
Yep.
It'll happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in your business, you ended up going from almost bankruptcy to earning almost over 300K. Tell us about that experience and how you did that.
Yeah, so my mine hit 2022 was definitely like a very hard year. I think all around financially, it was very hard. And it was a year of, it was almost like I'd made it through COVID, I'd made it through all of that. And I feel like it was two things like financially, it was kind of a hard year. And then two, I completely hit burnout. And
Mm,
And I think like when I was talking to you earlier about was like we had done boxes and then we had done balloons and it was kind of like and now we were doing both and it felt like a lot of managing because they're two very different businesses and very different in terms of how you market them and the balloons require a lot of labor um and so I definitely was a mix of burnout. And then you add on, like during COVID, we had taken out an idle loan to stay afloat. And we had gotten, because the boxes were doing so well, it was like, we need a warehouse. We're going to like move into this space. I signed this 5-year lease and moved in. And then all of a sudden, it was like the beginning of 2022, I believe it was. It was like all of a sudden, boxes like kind of came to almost a stop, it felt like. And the balloons were still kind of going, but not great. And it was a moment of like, so we just talked about all that stuff that happened to me. I felt like all that happened, but I didn't really know what I did to get it. Exactly.
And this was after your exposure on the New York Times
Yep.
and the New Day. So this is, you kind of went way up and now
Yep.
you hit this lull. Okay.
Yep. And really what was happening was the market shifted. The market shifted and people were not doing virtual party boxes anymore. And now we're in a gift box world where there's more competition within that. And then right, like visibility was almost like nobody was searching for virtual party boxes anymore. And
Right.
so it was really just learning um really like how do you get that back, like what are some systems and processes to put into place, what does marketing look like. But honestly it felt like I had ran a marathon, like just staying afloat, and so that's when I really felt like I had hit burnout. All of a sudden it was like we were really high, and then getting this warehouse, doing this stuff, and then it was like everything came to a stop. And it's amazing how quick debt can like rack up
Mhm.
so fast. And I remember it feeling just like heavy. And I was like, I cannot have this debt. It felt too constricting. And had a battle with that because I'm like, plenty of businesses have debt, but it was like, but it's not for me. I was like, I need a breather because I felt very like I was doing things that I didn't necessarily want to do, but I did them because I financially needed them. Um, but I do feel like a lot of good came through that time because it was really interesting. Like I was telling, like I wanted to run away from my life so bad. I was like, I told my husband, like, let's sell our house. I can pay off all the debt. We can just get out of here and I can be done with it. But I also knew that that wasn't really an option and it wasn't going to solve anything. And I had even thought about going back and getting a job. Like, is this worth it? Do I like building a business is really tough. There's a lot more behind the scenes that people don't necessarily see. It looks like it's all like fun and glamour, especially with like installs, right? Like it looks like for fun and we're just like partying the whole time. But there's definitely a lot of like keeping that going and how do you continue to get business um and so when that all happened, I it was interesting because I wanted to get a job, but I knew I could like feel it inside. It was like nothing is going that's not going to change your problems, and that's not going to make you any happier. And I remember thinking like you just need to sit in this uncomfort and and figure this out and not just run, which is what we
Mhm.
all naturally want to do when we're uncomfortable, right? Is just like, I need to do something else. Like whether it's like start a new business or like go back and maybe change your career. And there was just something inside of me that was like, just sit here and wait. And so it felt like dragging myself literally every day, but I got out of bed every day. I did work. I actually started cold calling like past people, like, do you need installs? Like, just trying to figure out how to drum up the business again and like, what do I need to do for the boxes? And so that was and it did. I felt like I was literally dragging myself. Um, and then things started to like slowly but surely kind of come back. I also learned during that time I did not have very good boundaries set. I worked
Mm.
all the time and it didn't matter, and I just finally realized that I was no longer doing things that brought me joy, which is why I was feeling a lot of burnout. And I needed to just cut off work at a certain time and just disconnect from it. And so that was what I ended up kind of diving into, was like I want to do more things and even installations that like brought me joy, and it wasn't just waiting for balloon jobs that other people wanted me to do, because innately like I love creating and designing and doing all of that. And so I kind of started diving into that a little bit, doing small projects around the house and like decorating, and it was interesting. It really like I felt like brought me back to life. um And then one of the things that you and I had like talked about earlier on was like how I mentioned like anxiety is good. Um we I during that time like my heart would be like all day long. I was like on the verge of crying every day. I had so much like my heart was like racing all the time. And I remember being like, I need to go for a run. I was like, I have to run because I was like, if my heart is gonna feel like this, it needs to be because I did something and not just because like I sat here. But I had a lot of like angst that I needed to get out. And so through all of that, like I ended up really adding like more consistency into my life. So I started like exercising a lot more. I started meditating, which I think actually was a huge that was actually a huge way of like quieting my brain, quieting some of the negative thoughts. I started to journal every day and writing out like what I was grateful for, the things that were going well, because I was focusing so much on what wasn't going well, but I wasn't really paying attention to all the good things that actually were happening
Mm-hmm.
and were still happening during that time. And so it was just really amazing to see like how powerful your brain can be. Because it was funny when I looked back, and I think I had mentioned like it felt like financially we hadn't had a great year, and it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Uh, and so all of these things kind of became a lot bigger in my mind than what they actually were. And
Mm-hmm.
so starting that morning routine, starting to work out, and all of that was due to anxiety and
Yeah.
finding ways to like mitigate it and get control of it. And that was one of the other things I learned too, was like stop trying to actually control it. Like just let yourself feel the anxiety, and then it actually will pass through a lot faster than you like constricting it and holding on to it.
Yeah, I used to run before I had kids. And I did find that on this entrepreneurial journey and small business journey, there are so many stressors. There's, things that are on your mind, and it's easy to get caught up in it because it is like I say, it's your baby,
Mhm.
it is your baby. And I noticed that even in my normal job, to issues at work or whatever, when I would run, I would be thinking about it, of course, because it's on my mind. I'm thinking about it all the time. I'm thinking about it when I go to bed. But there's something about when I would be running and I'd be thinking about it and kind of getting those endorphins to
Mm.
where by the time I was done with my run, I was just like, I could take a breath and I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that
Mhm.
big of a deal. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna let it go. I was able to really physically kind of release it through the exercise. And it's something for me, and everybody has their thing: meditation, yoga,
Yeah.
whatever works for you to get that release can be so valuable. I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely, after I have this baby, I want to start running, build myself up to do that because it is such a good stress reliever. It's good for you mentally. I feel like I could think clearly too. It
Mhm.
was very strange. So I do see the value in that. Uh, trying to just get through, especially as a small business owner, some of the challenges that you
Yeah,
face.
and I think like you said too, is like finding something that is yours that you enjoy doing. And I think that
Mhm.
meditation, I think a lot of people think of meditation as a sit down and close your eyes, but meditation can actually can be working out for a lot of people, right? It's just when
Mhm.
you kind of get a place where like you can shut your brain off and you can
Yep.
focus and you kind of come inward. And that I think is something that you're right. Like we all kind of forget to do that, especially when you're like hyped up, you're starting something and it's like, I don't care. I'll work all hours of the day. This is so
Mhm.
exciting. And then like eventually it's like, but it's not sustainable long term. And if you can kind of set those boundaries earlier on, you're better off. It's more sustainable in the long run if you can do that. And I really realized, because it was almost, you get excited whenever you get like a customer or somebody wants to buy from
Mhm.
you or somebody wants to do something and you want to drop everything you're doing and tend to that. And I've finally kind of gotten out of that scarcity mindset and been like, okay, these clients will still be here. I will answer them in an appropriate amount of time, but I don't have
Mhm.
to, it's not a fire that needs to be addressed at this particular moment. And knowing that, and I literally have to like have some of those conversations that it's like this can wait until the next day. And it's definitely added so much more sanity back to my life. And I like, it's so funny, I used to like love, I was like, I kind of felt like I missed out on like just those random like walks through Target that I felt like I used to do when you had right, like nothing else to do, and it's so funny, I started, like, doing some of that stuff where it was just needing, like, time. Like,
Mhm.
time to, like, not be going through a to-do list or doing anything, and, so now that I add that in, like, all of that seems like it's meditation on some level.
Mhm. Yeah, doing stuff for yourself and taking that space, and sometimes, sometimes I go to Home Goods.
Yes,
And
it is so therapeutic.
I'm like, "Do I even need anything?" And I'm like, "Well, I certainly always need some candles." So,
Yeah,
at least I walk out with a scented candle. But, just yeah, having that time to sort of do so I guess you could call it self-care, but to focus on something different or not focus on anything at all,
yeah,
just walk through. And also like getting outdoors is really great for that too, when you're busting your butt up a hike, like the only thing you can think about is either what was I thinking doing this hike? It's so hard, or I can't wait to get to the top to see the view and eat my
yeah,
sandwich. So
yeah,
that's really important. And, with the phones, it's so hard because you get a ding and you get an email and you look at it and you're like, okay, I'm not going to respond right now. But then you have to remember to respond when you go
yeah,
back and you start working again. So it's like, it's almost like you just got to no, I'm not checking my emails. I'm not doing this. I'm not even going to look until it's time to
mhm,
look.
yep. I have actually turned off all notifications on my phone, but I do have an email sickness. Like, I have, like, incessantly, like, checking my email, and I've been trying to be better at that, especially, like I said, after 6 o'clock, don't look at it, and even, like, mail, like, sometimes you'll get like, I don't know if you check your mail, and then it's like you get something from, like, the IRS or the Social Security, and I, like, learned very quickly, like, "You open that tomorrow." Because then like, there's nothing you can do that night about whatever it is that they're, like, messaging you about, and, like, you might as well just, like, leave that for the next day, and so it's funny, I even, like, do that with any, like, work mail. I'm like, "Tomorrow, we can
Mhm.
when I check in, like, we can do that." So,
Yeah, I think that's really healthy to do. I've started doing that too. Just, okay, this conversation is still businessy and it happens, I'll be talking to people um at 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, and I'm super excited about what we're talking about or the partnership. And then at some point, I'm like, all right, you're going to look at this and you're going to respond tomorrow because you're getting tired, first of all, and you don't want to say something stupid. And you want to be very clear about your response. And, yeah, especially when you have a family too. I don't know if you have any kids or anything, but it's hard to just even stay focused sometimes because you got other things going on.
yeah, my son is 16, and he actually just it's been interesting because I feel like in a way we're, like, are living parallel lives in terms of going after things, and I'm kind of learning a lot about self personal growth and just like the power of like your brain and like really realizing that like you do have control over your life and where you want to go and those things. And so he actually at 14 years old moved to Minnesota to play hockey, and so he lives
Oh.
there, and then he flies. He's actually home right now for spring break, so he comes home much just like a college student, just at 14. He's now 16. And so it's funny though, because coming up to that, like, we're like very early empty nesters, but I feel it was like once the time was coming to an end, like seeing him every day, it was like all these things that I was like so wrapped up in terms of business. It felt like I realized like the most important thing was the fact that I was a mom and
Mhm.
that time is very limited. Like, yes, I will always be his mom, but he's not always going to need me in the way that he was. And it was all of a sudden, it was like I wanted to like cherish all the time we had. And even so now it's funny because as he left, I set even more boundaries because it's like he's home and I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
I'm working a little bit more limited hours, trying to also maintain like focus when I am hanging out with them. He would totally probably disagree with that and thinks I'm always working, but I am actively trying. to make sure that I'm like being as present as possible because the timing just like feels limited. With
Mhm.
that, and I realize like my business will always be here, work will
Mhm.
always be there. It's never going to go anywhere. But that time that you have with your kids is so limited. And it's funny because I'm like, he was the whole reason that I
You
like
did this.
set out to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're the second person I've had on the show that has kind of had a similar story of starting their own business with their partner to have that kind of family balance. And it's interesting how I've changed in my evolution of before I had kids, never thought I was going to get married, never thought I was going to have kids, and now I do, and I feel the same way. I'm like, my son is a priority, my kids are a priority.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I would not have said that 10 years ago that I would be saying this. And now I work in a in an industry that's mostly women. I used to work with mostly men, now it's mostly women. And
Mm,
one of our icebreakers one day was what is your favorite role? We often wear many hats. What's your favorite role? Being a mom, being a mom, being a mom, being a mom in the chat was like the number one thing. And then there were a few being a cat parent. But um that was hands down. And I thought that was interesting too. Because
mhm,
even if, you know, your kid is your priority, the fact that that was everybody's answer on top of all the hats that we wear, I think that is really powerful, and it does show just the struggles that parents and female parents can
mhm.
face when trying to balance work and having a family and all
Yeah,
the emotions and the stress that comes along with it. Um, I
it
know, like,
is
that's why
hard.
I left my job.
Yeah, yeah. It is, and I don't and honestly, it's funny because it's like you think you have more. You do. I don't wanna act like you don't. You think that you have more balance if you go to work for yourself because you have more
Mhm.
freedom and flexibility. But what happens is your day gets really elongated because it's not like I go to work during this time and then you turn it off and you're off and this is what you do, right? Now it's like, okay, yep, I'm gonna take him here and then I'm gonna do a little work here and then I'm gonna like then I have to go pick him up from here. There's so many like little bits of time and my son was very into hockey, which is why he moved to Minnesota. So we were spending 4 hours in the evening like driving him to his hockey practice. It was like an hour north of us. And then he had practice for an hour or two, and then it was an hour back and so the time it was great because I did have the ability to like take him to school and pick him up and do that, but it actually caused more chaos, I feel like for me because my day was just elongated and honestly up until he left because like his schedule got way more demanding and he didn't have a license and it was like I was like he was essentially becoming like an adult and like needing to go to the gym and needing to go here and needing to do this and I'm trying to work and I'm fitting all that in and I felt like I can only work at like 2 hours at a time so I didn't feel like I could like dive into anything. And so actually when he had left it was like everyone kept asking me they were like how are you doing and I was like
Mhm.
amazing. I was like I'm doing amazing. And I've actually felt like the worst mom for feeling that way, but it was like I felt like I could take a deep breath and I felt like I had time and like I didn't have to rush around with like my head cut off trying to make sure that
Right.
everything was getting done. And it's funny because he's now been gone for 2 years and the first year, I literally enjoyed it. I was like, "This is amazing." I miss him. I miss him in the house,
Mhm.
but I didn't miss running all of that around. And now this second year is funny. Now I'm like, "Oh my," I'm like, "I really kind of miss like being a mom." Like I'm parenting from afar, but not totally. And he's definitely a little bit more of an adult, but I was like, I kind of miss like being a mom and I felt like super giddy when he was like kind of coming home even though he's
Mhm.
16 and wants he's getting to the point where it's like loves his mom but doesn't really, want to like cuddle or love me or do any sort of
Yeah.
thing that you would do when he was like a kid, right? Um so yeah, it's definitely an interesting like evolution, but I've definitely learned that if you have kids, like just enjoy the time that you have
Mhm.
and your business will be there and one day all you'll have is time to spend on your business.
Yeah. Yeah. My one of my bosses before he retired at my old job, we were talking and he said, the one thing I regret is working so much while my kids were young. And because during that time in that industry, they were working 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts. And that was kind
Oh
of
my
the
gosh.
norm. Um, and it was good money, right? So like they're bringing home the bacon, and he's just like, I wish I would have been home a lot more. And
Mhm.
that's really stuck with me. That was the one thing out of his really long career there that he told me. He's like, I just wish I would have been with my kids more when they were young, because now they're gone. Now they're moved away and they're adults, and he's like, you don't get that time back. So I thought that was
Yep.
pretty cool. And I was like,
Yeah.
all right, peace out, I quit.
You're right. I'm
I mean,
done.
it didn't play out exactly that way, but that stuck with me, and that is something that I think about when I make my decisions on what I'm going to do next. So,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what is your best or most, I don't know, important piece of advice that you would offer Grit City women?
Mm. I think actually, I mean, I really feel like what I have learned since starting, I'm gonna give you 2 because I feel like I always do that. I'm like somebody who just can't give one. Um, the first one would be that if you're starting out with doing anything, it is gonna take I feel like a lot of people, like, want things to start happening overnight, and I remember when I
Mhm.
first started, it took probably a good 8 months before I really started seeing, like, revenue coming in, and, like, you really have to stick with it and stay consistent. So that would be my advice, is like just keep going, and like the hard work that you're doing will eventually, like, all of that, somebody had given me the analogy, it's like you're just like stretching a rubber band, like all the activities and all the things you're doing, and then one day that's going to snap, and
Hmm.
all of that work that you've done is going to come back. And it was so true, because there was a point where I was just like, man, am I going to like catch any traction on this, is anything going to get going? So that was kind of in the very beginning. And the next advice I would give is just follow the momentum where it goes. Like, you can't manufacture like the momentum, and I think that that's what's kept me alive in my business, is really seeing and realizing like what is working, what isn't working, like how do we pivot, and not being so set in like, this is my business and this is what it does, we don't do anything else. Because I feel like we would be out of business by now had I not just followed the momentum where it's going. I do think that you can have intention with where you're wanting to go, and that's kind of, I feel like, my next kind of phase is okay, now we have these 2 businesses, what's this next phase, and what is the intention, and what does that look like, and going forward with some of those goals. um, but I feel like you have to follow, if you're in
Mhm.
anything, you have to follow like where the demand is.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, or you go to bankruptcy, right? I mean, you have to be making money to
Yeah.
maintain the business.
Or if you're not growing, right? If you're not growing, you're dying. So,
Mhm.
if you're not making changes and you're not constantly getting better or developing new programs or offerings or services, then eventually, it's probably going to potentially die out.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and your awesome advice. It was really great having you, Jamie.
Oh, thank you so much. It was so fun to be on here.
Born from the spirit of Grit City women, Gritty is the new pretty carries the torch, amplifying the voices, stories, and power of women who lead with resilience, purpose, and unapologetic grit. To support Gritty is the new pretty. Follow us on Instagram at Grit City Women or shop our online store at gritcitywomen.com.